Another principle that we look at in course 2 is Artifice. So Artifice is deception, trickery, misdirection. So criminals employ the use of deception and trickery well on an innate level, and people have been using it or implementing it in criminality and warfare forever. Right? So basically 2 means to use artifice or deception. One is to engage the brain. So we're talking about pre-fight, the pre-fight element, not the in-fight element, and clearly not the post-fight element. So understand, pre-fight is before the fight happens. In-fight's the fight. Post-fight's the end. Right? What happens after? Pre-fight is not an ambush, which means you've not been attacked without any intel, in which case deception is redundant. Will involve some form of introductory dialogue. So somebody will walk towards you, engage you with some sort of dialogue, and that might be aggressive, it might be passive aggressive, it might be deceptive, or incidental, like they know you. But the objective is for the person to get some conversation going with you in order to get close to you. And that might not be anything to it, but understand criminals will implement such a ruse in order to get close to you, to hurt you or rob you or threat of attack or whatever else. So 2 ways in which they do that. One, they'll ask you a question. So when you ask a question, you know, have you got time? Can you tell me directions to this place? Which is usually really good because now your vision will fixate on what I'm pointing to you to look at. Do you have a spare change? Do you have a light? Blah, blah, blah. Any of this. It could be a lot more sophisticated than that. But any question that, like a what, when, how, why, requires a response. Regardless of whether you give a physical, verbal response, you will be momentarily thinking about what that person's just said. So your brain will be engaged. So saying, you know, I don't want any trouble, it's a statement. If I say, look, I don't want any trouble, mate, what is it you want? What do you need? In which case now, I've engaged your brain momentarily. And in the context of potentially a street robbery, this says that I have something of value that I might give you. Regardless of that, a what, why, how, or a when engages the brain. And any good woman will tell you that men don't multitask well, so I'm not going to be thinking of hitting you whilst thinking about processing what you've just said. It's one or the other. And what this does is pattern interrupts the brain. Another way to do it is misdirection. So if you think about the old black and white films of fucking yesteryear, the Three Stooges, he goes, look over there, and boom, he slaps him. I mean, that's the concept. Is that ridiculous? But it can work. It can work well if you sell it. You have to be congruent. So, for example, in a situation like that, if I pointed over his shoulder as if I'm talking to somebody behind him, and I said, no, it's fine, just stay out of it, then that would indicate in his brain that there's a presence behind. I don't need him to look. It will just momentarily interrupt. But look at what it's actually doing. So by me going like this, and here I've got visual awareness of him, and maybe it's somewhat hostile and everything else I'm trying to negotiate. When I go from this to that, I'm taking my vision off him. So I'm replacing my vision with being very lightly tactile. And what I'm actually doing from here, if you notice, is I'm shifting weight for the best fucking knockout shot in the world. But I'm doing it very deceptively. So misdirection might be, no, it's all right, just stay out there. And then from there I would hit. I could combine the two if I like. I could say, what's your mate got to do with this? And then work off that. But misdirection, taking somebody's attention somewhere else, and brain engagement are 2 ways to momentarily pause this subject's thinking and halt his hard combative state to buy you the action trigger to strike first. Right? So as a simple example to that, if I use this pad, so I just use the context of a question here. If I'm fortunate enough to get a 1-man down knockout shot, then that's great. But if not, this first shot sets up my blitzkrieg, right? So literally from here, I might say, look, what does he want, mate? What's this about? Or anything like, what can I do for you? You know, you can buy that shot. Now, if you're going to sell such a shot, it wants to be congruent. So if I went to you, look, what can I do for you? I'm going to be wide-eyed, in a calm expression, well, certainly not an aggressive expression, an alarmed expression, if you like. My body language is going to be somewhat passive, shrug my shoulders, turn my hands over in exclamation, because I'm asking you something. And my words, volume, tone, and the pitch of those words will all be congruent to the physiological message of, what can I do for you? I don't want no trouble, what do you want? That's what I'm trying to sell. So if I went, look, I don't want no trouble, what do you need? As opposed to, look, I don't want no trouble, what do you need? This isn't congruent. So I've got to make sure that everything matches. So you've got to sell it, right? So a simple example, of one that a shot, hitting from asking a question would be, what does he need, mate? And if not, I would follow up from there. What does he need, mate? So this is just one example of the artifice that we're going to look at in course 2.